time, in this
Yes.
precarious time.
Yes.
And also, especially with this time of social isolation, I find it that I think people with disabilities and mental health issues are being, there's more light being shed on them now, because they're the most vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
They're one of the most vulnerable people. And also with the social isolation, there's a lot of people scared to, like, there's distancing. And it's kind of like, it brings me back to when, the times when people, had lepers, and, people didn't want to touch them, people didn't want to talk to them.
Mm.
And also, I think it's creating something with mental health, because people are now have to shelter and stay at home. So it's creating a lot of mental health challenges and anxiety in different ways.
Absolutely. Austin, may I quickly introduce you to the students by reading your bio really quickly? I apologize for the interruption. So to all the students in the classroom, I'm just excited to introduce you to Austin Tam, who shared with me to share with you that he identifies as Chinese American, 38 years old, and has discovered...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm 41 now.
You're 41 now. Okay, so this biography is a little old.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And Austin has shared with me that he has discovered in 2009 that he has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or also known as ADHD disorder, an invisible disability. Austin's mission is to raise awareness on disability issues, especially in the AA and NHPI community. So people no longer have to be invisible, and rather be invisible to be free to share their stories. Austin holds many important positions in the community, including community developer at the Buena Vista United Methodist Church and disability advocate for the AA and NHPI Disability Awareness Project. And Austin focuses on his work on mental health issues, and serves as chair for the Pool of Consumer Champions and Asian American Committee, an initiative funded by the Behavioral Healthcare Services of Alameda County. And lastly, Austin has been interviewed by KPFA, Apex Express, and has hosted a Making the Invisible Visible Disability Summit for 2 years in 2016 and 17, and has advocated for the intersecting issues around affordable housing, immigration, and disabilities. So I just want to provide that bio for all the students, and Austin has invited his friends and community members to join us. So thank you, Austin. Please continue your presentation.
I wanted to tell you, I wanted to just describe how I've been able to share my awareness with different communities around disability issues. It's not been an easy journey. Obviously, I have to overcome different issues to accepting who I was, and then finally feeling liberated to kind of share with the world and addressing issues wherever I am given the opportunity to speak, whether it's at the California Democratic Convention Disability Committee, or summits, or in classrooms, or panels, or community-based organizations. I want to speak to obviously make the invisible visible, and also because there's a lot of stigma in our society, especially in the Asian community, where it's not talked about, where there's shame being brought upon the families, and which I find in 2020, I think it's time that we need to talk about these issues. And that's when, modern minority comes into play. Modern minority meaning, like in Asian American community especially, it's I think the expectation is for people to to go to get educated, to go get a good job, to get good schooling, good grades, and I think that in itself causes mental health challenges, and it could be disability as well. Also, it took over maybe over 30 years to kind of come to the right diagnosis. I have ADHD cognitive disorder, and it took lot of like encouraging from my parents and from my minister and other friends to kind of come to terms with like what my real disability was and to embrace it. And so since 2009, since I turned 30 and where I got my diagnosis, like I said, I've been speaking to different communities, people. I was humbly elected on March 3rd to the Alameda County Democratic Central Committee, where I ran on making the invisible visible. And it's what the Central Committee is the gateway to get involved with our County Democratic Committee to help to register and educate voters, protect the right to vote, and work to elect candidates who will fight for our values. And I felt like disabilities were not being represented, so I decided to run, especially after being encouraged to run, just to bring disabilities onto the forefront for people to understand and to become more knowledgeable about the issue. And people have asked me, how do you understand a disability? And I've told people, to be honest with you, unless you are living the disability, it's you won't understand. I mean, even my parents, they understand, but to an extent, not no one completely understand. I'm continuing to understand my disability over time. I've evolved, and you learn more about yourself each day, in every minute, especially like in this time that we're living in. We are more confined to our own surroundings now. I don't know if so also I've worked to educate people, like I said. It's been humbling to be invited to speak to different classrooms and different areas and events. And I've not only educated myself, but I know I've educated a lot of other people in my community, friends and family, social justice activists, people I work with every day. And there's a group called Helping Hands, in which I think the teacher Jolie is going to share the slides with. I'm now a liaison to the Helping Hands organization, which focuses on participants over 18 and 21 who are mainly Vietnamese, Chinese, and Mandarin speaking participants. And it's really inspiring because I think that was the vision that I kind of saw with my Asian Pacific Islander Disability Project that I was encouraged to create in 2013. So that's some of the summary of what Helping Hands East Bay does. And it's inspiring because you get to be around people with disabilities every day, and you go out in the community and you share what it's like to have disability, and you become more visible by going to the grocery store, the food bank, the library, just like out in public with not having the fear of being stigmatized or being judged or looked down upon. Also, just different ways like we can support our community and support people with disabilities by inviting people to speak, or different things like that. And it's and I'm hoping to help others and encourage others to share their stories, those who might have learning disabilities or mental health issues, so we don't have to become invisible anymore. And so there could be more and more people's voices to be a voice for others, and to be a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. and just to let the society know that, you know, people with disabilities and mental health issues are just like any other human beings. We have limitations, but it's the stories. I feel like it's the most powerful, because you can't correct the story, you can't lie about a story, because everyone's story are their own. So I think that's the most powerful. Even in today's society right now. I mean, now we are like, we can't go outside, and we're kind of enclosed to our own surroundings. So now it's like we all have to speak from, like, you know, like from in a distant way. But I think some things, I mean, I think we saw this coming in our society, but unfortunately, sooner rather than later. So I don't know if anyone.
Austin, this is Joe. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts.
No problem. I'm trying to get my thoughts together, because I was like, I'm kind of like trying to get focused. Sorry.
That was completely my fault. I totally threw you off your game by sending you the wrong Zoom link.
It's the practice, though, you know.
I just want to take a moment and welcome the community members and friends of Austin Tam. Welcome to the Asian American Studies 190 course at UC Berkeley. This is a course that's focused on AA and NHPI community health. Please feel free to introduce yourselves through the chat box, and type in who you are and how you might be affiliated or related to Austin. Austin, I'm showing here on my screen the PowerPoint presentation that you had sent me.
Thank you. Thank you.
From Helping Hands. Is there any? Would you like for me to go through these slides?
No problem. I just the woman Ezra Chow, who's in charge of Helping Hands, she was like, she can email. She just wanted me to email you the slides to just show in case people were interested. Mm-hmm. Interested in what they do, but I think it's, you know, if Helping Hands East Bay can do something, I feel like the society, and especially in the Asian community, they need to step up, and they need to they can do something like this, because here are participants with disabilities that are like, you know, in this day class, and the people who helped found this are parents of children with disabilities, which is very inspiring.
I have found Austin. Let's see. I think it was. I believe it was. There's one slide that. Yeah, here we go. This slide was really interesting to me personally. The 2017 through 2018 expenditures by diagnosis.
Yes.
So it looks like on the left-hand side, there are different types of diagnoses, like epilepsy, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, autism, and then it's color-coded where there's folks overall, orange is adults, gray is ages 3 to 21, yellow is ages 0 to 2, and it shows these different income or more expenditures, I should say. Could you provide some more context behind this slide, or what this slide is trying to demonstrate?
I think it's demonstrating, like, maybe, to be honest with you, maybe the funding. Mm-hmm. I really don't know, because, you know, unfortunately, money, that's a limitation. I don't really, the graph's a little bit hard to understand. I think, oh man, I think she did email me information about this. I should have copied it down. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I think it was about funding, because there are some projects who address these identified issues, like adult day services for consumers, consumer family mentorship projects. Mm-hmm. And then they talked about, let's see. Yeah, they talked about, I thought these questions were interesting in terms of what regional center services one might need or want that are not available to you and your family member? What would make a difference? What are your unmet needs? So I thought these were really interesting questions.
Yeah.
Austin, could you take a moment to describe to us, for those who may be unfamiliar with invisible and visible disabilities, how would you define that in context? We have a lot of undergraduate students who are really inspiring to be community health professionals, and many who are graduating this year. And we work with so many vulnerable populations, and I think especially in the API community, we never really hear too often about helping folks with invisible and visible disabilities. Why might that be, that we don't really hear about these issues? And could you kind of provide a definition around invisible and visible disabilities?
Well, I think invisible disabilities, like, for example, like invisible disabilities, like, with ADHD cognitive, I mean, you really cannot tell. I mean, like, and in comparison to visible, I mean, like physically, like someone who like with the developmental disability, I mean, severe, like I know it's a spectrum, it's like severe disability, you can tell, but like, as someone with invisible disability, it's kind of like, it's easy and it's challenging. The easy part is like, people won't judge you because they can't tell, but then the hard part is like, I've had to, after high school more so, I've had to tell people about my disability. I mean, like, who wants to say, like, I mean, I had to be vulnerable and had to be like, I kind of had to admit my flaws and just share about my disability, my limitations. I mean, it's been hard because, like certain jobs you are limited with, and then you have to tell your friends you have a disability, and then people are like, oh, now I understand, and I won't judge you, and now I understand. Because it's not easy because you have to tell people. It's kind of like but I think that's the difference with invisible and visible. And because when you have visible disability, you can, I think, for so long, I like in junior college, I just like pretended I didn't have disability because I didn't want to get I didn't want to get the help. I didn't want to get the feel sorry for me, and I wanted to be like everyone else, just go into a class of like 60 people and just go to a lecture, and then just kind of like but then and not help with accommodations, because I was in denial and I was embarrassed. So I was like, oh, and and also they somewhat isolate. They put like it's called DSPS and disability centers in colleges. It's kind of like they put it on the side, kind of like they're like just like special day class in high schools and elementary schools. They kind of like isolate you guys. It's like isolate, so it's kind of like rather than integrate. I mean, it's kind of, and then it makes you feel more judged, right? But that's why I think invisible and visible is like, because invisible, because so many people with disabilities like are invisible. Like a lot of the people I know, like learning disabilities, and then when you have development disabilities, it's makes people uncomfortable, awkward. Because I've seen people in Chinatown and they look really like uncomfortable and nervous, and then that's why I on purposely I acknowledge them, right? But then it's kind of a shame, unfortunately, but I think it's education, because it's like a spectrum, right? Like a spectrum of like mental health issues, right? You have different mental health issues, and then you have a lot of, and some people with mental health issues, some people that I know, they were like, they thought they had autism or ADHD or something else, but it became a mental health issue more than disability, learning disability.
Thank you so much, Austin, for your thoughts. What are, in your opinion, what are appropriate ways to communicate sensitively with people with disabilities? I think this is a common question I hear among my own peers, my own colleagues, right? We work with so many vulnerable populations, and sometimes, for me personally, I get scared, right? In terms of, I hope I don't call a certain community by the wrong name or wrong identity. So in your opinion, in your experience, what are appropriate ways to communicate sensitively with people with disabilities?
You know, it's kind of like, you know, you know, you know, I've been educated, you know, like with people with disabilities, people need to say people with like disabilities, right? Like now, say if someone says handicap, you're supposed to say people with disability, or like even the R word, right? Which I really don't like. I mean, they used that back in the 60s, right? But it's you know, it's really hard because, you know, you want to be defined, right? Because, you know, like I told people, I'm like and other friends have told me that like, I'm not defining you, as your disability does not define you. But then it's kind of like, it's hard because like, I think everyone has a different term. Like, you know, at our United Methodist Church, we passed something about learning mental health and disabilities, and whether we should call it differently able or disability. But see, that differently abled, some people were like, I'm disabled and I want to be called someone with a disability. But see, the differently able, some people was like, well, that's judgmental, so you should call it differently able. Like, oh, people are differently able. But then, you know, it's harder to remember that because, you know, we're so used to saying disabled. It's like hate, like we're so used to say hate, and then we're like, we want to say dislike, but then it's easier to say hate and it's easier to say disabled. But I mean, most people, and then a lot of people with disabilities, I mean, some of them that have a hard time talking because of the developmental disability, I don't think they can tell you. It's hard because not everyone can tell you, and some people get offended. They're like, don't ask me, because people have asked me how I want to be described, but I'm like, well, I don't know, just say Austin. I'm Austin because it's kind of like, you know, and you know, like I think I've overcome overcome a lot, and I think a lot of times, you know, I like to make people laugh, and you know, I use, like we had a comedy night a year ago, or 2 years ago, and actually I used like my different flaws as a way to like be funny because, you know, it's actually funny because, you know, I text too fast, text too much. I spit when I'm talking. That's like, I get too excited. You know, I lose things like every 5 minutes, like my iPod, my iPad, my phone, my like. I mean, you know, everyone who's on there that know me, they're probably laughing at because it's kind of like, you know, and not to give it an excuse, right? I used to use it as an excuse because like, well, I have disability and this is how I am, and you don't understand. You don't understand. I used to tell people you don't understand, and you need to put yourself in my shoe in order to understand, because it's kind of like, you know, it's not like it's easy because, you know, like my mom and my parents and people said, if you didn't have a disability, man, you'd probably be like, I don't want to see CEO, but you'd be, because, you know, there's certain things I'm really good at. I'm good at memorizing things. I'm good at memorizing who's on here tonight. I'm good at memorizing, unfortunately, like the whole coronavirus thing. I'm good at memorizing phone numbers, like what happened when. I mean, that's a blessing and a curse because I've good memory of what happened. I have details and like the way I process. And like when you ask me about disabilities, it's definitely a different process. You know, we all process differently. I mean, it's all a learning process, and it's kind of like, you know, I hope people understand what I'm saying. I'm like, I talk extremely fast too. I mean, maybe it's and how ironic that we're doing this today because, you know, we did, like, I guess when this email came out, I mean, when I was invited to do this, I mean, I think the coronavirus was happening in China and other countries, but it was not developing yet here. I mean, as we know, but it's you know, especially with people with disabilities, I feel like, you know, we are very isolated. We're very, it's like a wilderness. We're like in our own wilderness. We are in our own isolation. It's like lonely. It's kind of a lonely journey. And I think a lot of people with disabilities can't go out sometimes because you know, they can't go out because it's maybe because of their own limitations. And it's ironic that now everyone is kind of, I'm not saying everyone's disabled, but everyone's kind of like has to be stuck in their own, and then they can only talk from a distance. But I think a lot of people with disabilities, a lot of times they can't go to rallies or meetings because, you know, they need accessibility. Like BART's bad, bus is bad, you know, there's not enough accessibility accommodations. And the people who will speak for them, sometimes that's why we need able-bodied people to speak for us, because otherwise, and then people always say, oh, people with disabilities are grouchy people. But I'm like, man, if I was physically disabled, I would be really grouchy too, because it's like you have to scream and yell. And now with this, you have to wear a mask, and you have to like, you're stuck in line full of like hundreds of people because we're trying to go to the grocery store or buy essential needs, right?
Thank you so much. Thank you so
No
much for sharing those thoughts.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions coming in the chat. One question comes from Gabby. We know what kind of ways, and Gabby, this is a totally appropriate question to ask, so thank you so much for contributing. Gabby asks, what kind of ways would you recommend reaching out to vulnerable folks, asking, do they need something? You know, I heard it will be hard for these folks. Is there a way to dream up with services and help, especially during times of this pandemic? And Gabby, hopefully I asked that question the right way. If you'd like to clarify. Okay, I see your nod. So Austin, could you provide a response to Gabby's question?
You know, I know that's a hard one. I mean, and if it, as I think it's gonna come down to like networking. I mean, people's contacts, because if someone knows a neighbor, maybe do it that way. I mean, and then call different services. I mean, it's hard because you can't go out. You can't go out, and they're stuck at home. I mean, I think maybe it's people you know. Oh, like the elderly, you know, elderly and seniors are that way too, right? Those with who have limitations and who can't go out. I think I hope I answered that right. I mean, it's more difficult now because we don't know who the people are. It's just like the people who are like low income and like tenants and like homeless. I mean, it's kind of a little bit difficult. And I think also, unfortunately, it's sad because like I said, with the social distancing, I mean, we need to do social distancing, but you know, it's kind of like the people's reactions towards other people, it's like they're treated like lepers. It's like it's really ridiculous. It's really unfortunate and sad, because people are like, you know, when you see people, you have to be far away. But like when people with disabilities are like that, they don't want to shake hands. They want to judge. They want to just whisper. They want to, you know, it's. And I think maybe this time, as this stuff going on right now, opens the doors for like conversation or something, you know, about like, you know, because, you know, unfortunately, when this is all over, you know, we're not going to be the same. I mean, I hope there's more compassion, because there's no, I see a lack of compassion for people, for each other in this world, in this country, you know.
I agree with you. Can I agree with you more? Thank you, Austin. We have another person. The initials go by KG. KG says, "Hi, Austin. I recently voted for you in the Democratic primary. And side note, I also voted for you, Austin. Can you talk about what your elected position entails, how you got into politics, and what kind of policies you'd like to fight for Asian Americans and disability communities?"
Well, what we do on the committee, I mean, I don't get sworn into January 2021, but what we do is we select we select like what we want to see in the party, and in our endorsements, and who we support in the ballot measures, and also bring up issues that are never talked about in the committee, like housing, immigration, stuff like stuff about disability issues. Because in every conversation I had during the debates, I brought up making it visible, and talked about the accessibility issues. And I'm very, like, people know I'm very compassionate. I'm very passionate. I'm very outspoken. I speak the truth. I'm very honest, even when it's not popular, even though it makes me sound like, I don't want to say crazy, but it makes me look like really, I'm very passionate, and I really love, you know, passionate about everything, everybody, for the underdog. And just, I got into social justice, I think, I think more so when, I had problems with school and friends and being judged because I had no friends, and, kind of, and then just issues with my disability. And the church I go to is a social justice church, Buena Vista United Methodist Church. My pastor is Michael Yoshi, and I think I give a lot of credit to him to help me work on a lot of issues regarding housing, human rights issues, immigration, and, because our church has been here, I think 120 years. It's 120, and we went through the, internment camp, and we try to intersect a lot of issues with each other, especially in today's society. And that's how I got involved with social justice and politics and different things. I mean, but especially in today's society right now going on, I think it makes us feel very helpless because there's so many issues going on, and especially it all connects to healthcare, I think, because healthcare and healthcare needs to be a human right for everybody. And obviously, it's a problem.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's see. I have another question. Let's see. It's from Galaxy S10 Plus. I think is the name of the phone.
I don't know who that is, but they know who I am.
But let's see. Anonymous person. This person asks, would you ask Austin to talk about his work with housing for people with disabilities? So could you talk about the intersectionality between housing and people with disabilities, and describe more work in that?
With housing disability, housing is disability. I think there's a lot of issues because there's things about Section 8, people with Section 8, vouchers, and a lot of people who are evicted are like people with tenants with disabilities, and it's and also I think there needs to be like with people with disabilities. I think we need to have more. There needs to be more housing for people with disabilities too, because some want to be more independent, right? Like in order for us to encourage people to be independent, we need a place, affordable place for in order to house people with disabilities. And I think I'm working in Alameda, Alameda Rental Coalition Senior and Disabilities Committee. We've been trying to work locally and in the community on to kind of help advocate for those with disabilities to help find housing. And like people know, it's hard to find affordable housing as it is, and especially and also you have to go through the bureaucracy, and you have to go through I love how people say they're so supportive of people with disabilities, but then they don't. They need to show. They need to walk the walk and talk the talk, and and step up to the plate, and and help people with disabilities, like help maybe, because it encourages us to be more accepting of our own disabilities, because it helps us to be more like independent living. It helps us becoming more independent. It makes us not feel so different and isolated, different from other people, right? Because it's like people who want to move out, right, and who can move out should be allowed to move out, and into different places, like center places, and somewhere close by, like in Alameda. It's hard. Everyone wants to live in Alameda, and it's the place to live, but then it's kind of like, what's affordable in Alameda for people? Not affordable for people with disabilities, especially,
Absolutely. I really like what you said. Helping folks feel more independent, feeling less isolated. I feel like there's certainly a connection between housing and mental health. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. So For students and community members and friends of Austin Tam, please feel free to chat in these amazing questions. These are great. I feel like we have like and the Galaxy S10 Plus was actually from Joyce Ann.
Oh, I knew it was Joyce Ann. I'm feeling it was like, they want to be anonymous. I'm like, no, you're not anonymous. I had two people in mind, but she's a force to be reckoned with too. I know she's listening right now, but you know, like you all are a force to be reckoned with right now. So especially like, you know, especially in this time, it makes us all kind of, I think, all kind of appreciate each other. Yeah.
It looks like someone has raised their hand, and there's the letter J, and I'm wondering if this person would like to talk.
Jenny?
I'm gonna unmute you. I think it's Jenny. Jenny, did you want to ask a question or make a comment?
Maybe she's kidding.
Okay.
Maybe
maybe it was an accident.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get virtual hands raised by accident.
Because I can't. Yeah, no problem.
Great. You know, I did a little bit of reading in terms of you know, what it's like being disabled and Asian, right, in America. And I think my students, we talk a lot about, you know, Western values, right, non-Westernized values, and I think I'm curious to hear from you. You know, Asian folks with visible and invisible disabilities. They're often, we know that we understand that they're often stigmatized and whatnot, and discriminated against, and they go through a series of hardships. Where might this be coming from, and how can we address these, you know, the stigma, you know, for folks who are feeling alone, you know, and these incidents of stigma and discrimination?
Oh, okay. Where it's coming from, I think unfortunately it's the culture, because I didn't know that it was a stigma till my mom and dad told me, because they're like, it's a stigma. And I'm like, you know, after that, I'm like, you know, I don't blame people, like, you know, for example, in the people in the Asian community, because they probably like, why do I want to share my story when, you know, it's a stigma and I'm like by myself. But it's hard because, you know, when I speak to places, I'm like, I find myself being the only person that's Asian, and then, you know, and then that looks like me, the only person of color, and then, you know, it's very interesting, and it's interesting too, because I'm like, it's interesting. That's like, I asked them, I said, there's not, you know, looks like all men have disability. They're like, no, it's because, you know, women also have disability, you know, but I said, I think because of the whole culture, like, you know, for women, that's what someone told me. I was like, that's like the whole, you know, acceptance of it, and also where it might come from, and how I think we need more. I think we need more people to share their stories in order to better things. Like even in the mental health arena, like I find myself understanding mental health sometimes more. I'm not more, but like I have to say, like, you know, people are lucky to have Asian health services, right? But then they don't, but like with the disabilities, with Asian with disabilities, I'm like, I can't really go to, like, I could go to Ed Roberts campus, but that doesn't have anything that says Asian, anything. It says world disabilities, but no Asian disability. I mean, I find so I think like, and then, you know, I really wish there was somebody like a leader, like, you know, in different areas, issues, there are leaders like that you could look up to, right? That has a disability, right? Like in the civil rights movement, right? You had Martin Luther King, and you had Gandhi, and you had you had like, you know, people like that. But then like in the disability movement, we had Ed Roberts, but then you had, I mean, but especially in the Asian community, there's really, like, you know, I know there are individuals that I know that I see as leaders and that I look at as leaders, but I mean, there's not like one. I mean, I think now in this society, there's not one leader. I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting, right? Because you can't really say, you know, it's interesting, right? And because I can only, like with Asian people I know with disabilities, I could literally count on my finger, like, you know, and people, like, the thing is, people who could really share the stories, that there are people like, you can't assume every people with disability who are Asian especially can share, right? Because people like, I don't want to share, or maybe they have a language barrier, or, you know, and I get excited when I find someone with a disability. I'm like, yes, I'm not saying, you know, yes, I'm glad you have one, but I'm like, oh, wow. Someone will come to me and said, I've learned disability. I'm like, yeah, oh my God, I'm not by myself. And
I'm always happy when I can meet somebody who has a learning disability, and I'm like, yeah, you have a disability. Not like, oh, I'm glad you have a disability, but like, yeah, somebody else.
yeah. Oh, who's speaking? Is that Jenny? Is that Jay? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Never mind. Okay, sorry. I'm like, oh, no one.
Actually, though, I'm not sure who just spoke, but I think.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, okay. Thank you for for sharing. No, but yeah, I think that's where it comes from, and I think, you know, it passes on to generations, like parents, like, you know, that like, oh, I don't want to, you know, and you know, at the end of the day, at the end of our lives, I think we are. I mean, you know, people become, you know, like, you know, because they get old and elderly. But see, that's the thing. I find it interesting because it's like, well, you can, when you grow older, right? But then, like, you know, you might, why don't you accept it, you know, when you're younger? But then it's kind of like, you know, that's a hard thing. Like, you know, if you had to do a census on disability, people with disabilities, you would really have to go like knock on people's door and like have to come in and out. It's not like easy. I mean, census, like for like counting people, it's hard as it is, but like counting disabilities, I'm like, who wants to identify as people with the disability? I mean, I don't like to do it either. Like when I say like, what kind of disability you have, I'm like, oh God, I'm like, you know, I used to say I want to be part of the mainstream instead of the Asian community because they're so rude. It's such a stigma with people with disabilities, right? Because I'm like, well, they look so embarrassed, but I'm like, well, it's you know, it's like yeah.
Yeah, you know, this is actually something we talked about at the beginning of the semester. We don't have, it's hard to find data on you know, the number of folks with disabilities, right? The percentage of a population with disabilities, right? In Alameda County, for example, like we found one data source that gave a range somewhere between 10 and 30%. So there's lack of data, there's lack of information. I think to your point, it's a sensitive question, right? It's certainly underreported. In your opinion, what is probably the best way to capture accurate representation of, you know, folks with disabilities and be able to capture that information and break it down by, you know, racial and ethnic groups like, you know, Asian, Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. I mean, there's 50 ethnicities in our community alone, right?
So we have to find accurate. So you want to? Your question is like, accurate. You know, accurate is kind of like, well, accurate. I mean, because, you know, like I want to say with disabilities, there are people. I feel like the questions are like sometimes like, oh. Are you, like, some people like, are you physically disabled? Because I've seen things physically disabled. I've seen nothing about, I've seen developmentally and physically, but then the thing is, what about the invisible? What about the ADHD cognitive one? Because I have cognitive, like, you know, a lot of people I know that like I have ADHD, but I'm like, but see, the cognitive is the one. I mean, I think the accurate world is, we all come in different shapes and sizes. It's like the same thing as like people of color and people. I mean, it's hard to find an accurate. The accurate thing I feel like is it's really difficult to get a count because to be honest with you, and to be forthright, to say, you know, it's a stigma. But that won't come up. Stigma will not. It won't be named. Stigma won't be named, right? It's only that. I mean, stigma won't be named because it's like, how come it's so hard to find and like, you know, that find a thing. The last thing I found some on data was 2011. I mean, maybe there's more stuff, but 2011, I'm like, this is not like very accurate at all. it's like 4.9, or it said 2.9 or something. I'm like, no, I don't think so, because all these people are like coming to terms and saying they have a disability. I don't know. I think it speaks for itself, to be honest with you. I mean, it's kind of like, until we all are like counted, until like more of us share stories, I mean, we can't really, we can't like, it's almost the same thing with racism, hate crimes. I mean, if you can't talk about that, if no one will come up, you won't know. And then the person might not say, I want it to be a hate crime. I don't want to be identified, right?
Right.
Like the Asian person that got jumped in, actually in New York, he got, unfortunately he died afterwards, because I think because of the whole racism about the whole coronavirus and Chinese people, people are being, there's a lot of racism towards Chinese people, because people like, you're the one who created coronavirus. I mean, and then the guy the old man didn't want to come forth and say it was a hate crime. And there was 3 incidents. There's more incidents now, but that was, but.
We have a couple of comments. Thank you, Austin. One of our students, Jenny Kwan, she commented, I wonder how well the census does with accurately representing the community of those with diverse abilities, and if there's any push to improve the kinds of questions being asked to gain better knowledge and get more accurate representation. So I think that's an excellent comment. Another comment by Kelly Liu, one of our students, is just a general comment. Someone with ADHD under DSP, Asian American, I relate to a lot of what has been brought up here. On prominent Asian American disability activists, off the top of my head, I really have benefited from material from Alice Wong and Mia Mingus as well. So thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. And speaking of disability activists and leaders, kind of like, leaders of like the civil rights movement and whatnot. I mean, I would say, hey, Austin Tam, that's you. You could be our modern day.
No, I appreciate that. But you know what? Yeah, Alice Wong is someone that's really inspiring, because I think she got, I don't want to say award from the Obama award or something from him, because when I was thinking about doing a Asian Pacific Disability Project, someone brought up Alice Wong, and I was like, oh wow, and then I interviewed her in San Francisco. Yeah, Mia Mingus. Those were the 3 of us that was interviewed for the Apex Express in 2013. You're welcome to see it later if you want to. Hear about it, because it was on audio, so we shared about our 4 different disabilities, the 4 different invisible disabilities. So yeah.
Great. I just did a quick Google search. I don't know who Alice Wong is myself, but it seems like she's the founder of the Disability Visibility Project.
Yeah.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. There was a question, and considering the time, we are technically at the end of our class time, but because we started late, and that's purely my fault, I'm going to just propose staying on for about 10 more minutes. And for students who have to hop off, please feel free to do so. You can watch the recording later, but we'll go up till 6:40. There's just one more question that was asked. It was by, let's see.
No more, huh?
There was one. Oh, Heidi. Heidi.
Yeah. Oh, Heidi, hi.
She said, you said during college you wanted to hide your disabilities. When and what led you to become a disability awareness advocate? Well,
what happened was, because, I wanted to hide in college, because I think my goal was to try to go to UCLA and try to transfer and different things, but I couldn't get through math, and I think I was trying to hide it, because I think it was coming to reality more. Because in high school I was more sheltered. My parents, they did a really good job trying to make me feel like I wasn't anyone different, especially in the Asian community, Chinese community, right? And also it didn't change until I was encouraged to share about my disability, and then I share with my pastor, who's a good friend of mine, good, really inspiring leader in the Asian community. I was talking about how I felt so bad by myself, my self-esteem was bad, but then we connected the two together, and we realized my disability was a big factor of it, because, you know, I couldn't accept who I was, and I didn't, you know, I didn't feel good enough. I had to feel like I had to compare myself. And then I felt like disconnected to the world, disconnected to the community. You know, you can't relate to others. You have no friends who have disabilities. It's like something must be wrong, because I was like, but then after all those time, and then we had a disability Sunday at church, and we had different, like, when I became more empowered, I started becoming, you know, I became more comfortable to share my story. And then I had someone was like, can you find someone who's Asian with a disability? I was like, no, I could find other people who are like African-American, Latino, like Leroy Moore, who's an inspiring disability justice activist. But like with Asian, I'm like, good luck, because I'm like, I don't know. And I think that's where I became inspired to become an activist, and where I want to encourage others to share their story, and then also encourage parents, because, you know, I know so many people who are parents, right? Like, we had a summit, and there were so many parents with kids with disability, but then the children obviously cannot share, some of them, because of their limitation, or like, you know. And I found out there were more policy people who made maybe like different, like, directors who are Asian, who work in the arena. But I was like, you know, there's something wrong with the picture, because there's people, literally no one with disabilities at the table. But then there's, which is disturbing, because you can't start movement, and you cannot change things unless you have the people who are really affected share their own stories, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Heidi. I know she's a friend of mine, and her and her brother and her husband are on there here. So I appreciate you all coming on. That's why I was stressing. I'm glad. Well, I would have been really more nervous if I was in the presentation, you know, because I could see your people. I'm really bad at eye contact too. It's part of my disability. It's really bad, and I'm like, I'm not good at looking at the people when I'm talking. Actually, it's funny, because I'm looking at the computer right now. It's because I can't see your faces. But
well, I think you're doing great. And
thank you. But people like you, Joe, and AHS, and people like that, I think with mental health issues, I think, you know, I try to connect the two, but unfortunately, I find it to be competing. Sometimes I feel like I'm competing against mental health, because that was my problem. I was like, I know more about mental health, and I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice, because I'm like because mental health, everyone said, oh, disability is so easy to understand. It's so easy. And I'm like, well, it's easy. Can you kind of share what's easy about it? Because it's not easy, because I could tell you about the history of disability movement, but I have to tell you, it's through the white lens, because, like, you know, Asian, Black, Latino, other, you know, they're not part of the movement. And I'm like, I wish I could say there are movies about the disability movement. Like, you know, I wish there was like movies, like, you know, people like, I know there are people in the media, but like, you know, I wish there were more awareness, like public service announcements, shows, you know, and you know, and you don't want someone who's able-bodied play a disability person, but unfortunately, that's, you know, it happens, right? I mean, a lot, you know.
Thank you, Austin. So a couple of last questions, and I'm going to group these two. Joyce Ann asked, do you feel less lonely now that you are telling your story? And I wanted to just also ask this question, how can students get involved in disability activism and justice?
Well, I think I feel less lonely. I think it's going to be, it's less lonely, but then it's kind of like, what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to merge all of us together. Like, you know, obviously, like, you know, people, you don't have to be Asian or anything, you know, I mean, but I think, you know, the more people that share their stories, like, it's one more person, because it's kind of like, even if there's like 2 or 3, it's like easy, right? But, and also, I hope that answers your question. I mean, that's my limitation too. I don't. I think yes, I feel less lonely. And then how can students be involved? I mean, I think I don't want to say educate themselves, but I think maybe, you know, I think a lot of us. I mean, maybe not all of us, but I think some of us know people with disabilities. I don't know how we could do it. Like encourage others to share stories. And, you know, maybe parents who have kids with children with disabilities can encourage other parents to like share their story. And because you know, especially in this time of isolation, I mean, you know, it's easy to just say, oh my God, I'm so stressed and I'm so depressed and I want to just like whatever. But then I'm like, well, maybe it's time for us to we self-reevaluate ourselves and kind of just like maybe share about what we want to do after this whole thing is over. Maybe like what we want to do, what we learned from this. I mean, what we think about social distancing, because social distancing, we haven't heard about social distancing, how it's hard on people emotionally, but how we can actually maybe connect it to like different issues, you know, different things. Because it's difficult. It's such an inconvenience that you like even to get involved. People are not used to calling each other on the phone, but now it's like, you know, it's like back in the day. I mean, because back in the day we had no phone, no computer, right? But now, I mean, like look at the people with disabilities and stuff. Some of them don't have computers, some don't have phone, some can't go on the phone, or some are like can't talk, so they have to go, you know, through sign language. You know, that's, you know. But I hope we can have more opportunities to, and actually you're the first Asian actually to like leader, I mean, like instructor or like, you know, to have asked me to do this, because I usually am asked to like, and it's ironic that I'm doing this is a college course, because I'm like, God, UC Berkeley, I'm like, oh, UC Berkeley, I mean, UC Berkeley, you know, known for like, oh, you straight A students, you know, have to be smart, you have to study all night. I'm like jealous. I used to be like, I'm so jealous. I want to study all night and just guess. So I would go to class and just guess on something. I'd be like, I'm going to the Asian studies class and guessing and just being like everyone else. I'm just going to just have an all-nighter and then wake up at 5 a.m. and try to do my math and just be like I'm Chinese and Asian. Right? That's terrible, but that's our minority. I mean, yeah. I know you guys are all laughing right now. I mean, we have more time to study now. I mean, we have more time to study and more time, you know. I mean, now we have like a whole 4 months, you know, but then we can't go out until May 1st. I mean, right. You know, I know. I'm glad to see to see people's faces smiling, because I'm like, oh man, because I'm like, man, I used to want to say I want to go UCLA. I want to get 4.0. I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting 4.0 for, but I want to just, do you want to do it for yourself or are you doing it for others? Because
that's a great question. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, are you doing it for yourself or for others? Austin, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for really taking the time to share your story and to answer all these questions and to allowing the students and your friends to participate in this really great discussion. I want to thank the students for those who are sticking around at Status X41, and really appreciate you for sticking around. And thank you to all the community members and friends for making it. I sincerely apologize for sending the wrong Zoom link. And Austin Tan says, love you all. Austin, Austin, thank you again for your leadership, for your commitment. Congratulations. We can't wait for you to get started on that central committee, the Alameda County Democratic Central Committee. I firmly have full faith and fully believe that you'll do great work there, and we will continue following your work. Our students are chiming in. Kyle, Jenny,
thank you.
Dennis,
oh my
Ryan,
gosh,
Naomi,
people.
Sam, Kara, everything. Thank you.
I feel like I've known you guys forever. I'm like, thank you this, thank you that, thank you that. I'm like, wow.
Zoe, Vanessa, everyone's saying thank you. So
wow, Tudor Mike, I don't know who. Oh, that's my friend. He's trying to hide himself, but wow. That's Julia. Oh,
hi,
man.
Austin, Gordon Reed.
Oh, Gordon Reed, you're the best. I love you, bro.
No.
Wow, oh, that's Oh, that's beautiful. Kelly, Tudor, Matt, Kyle, Heidi. All, oh my God, you guys are the best.
For those who who joined a little bit late, I just want to let you know that a recording will be made available for this session. So you're more than welcome to email me at joehyunglee@berkeley.edu. I just headed it to William, not to everyone.
Oh, that's William. That's my friend. Oh, that's Bill. That's for sure. Okay.
There you go. There's my email. So feel free to email me if you'd like a copy of this recording. Heidi says, "You are the face. You are the one we can look up to. You, thank you."
Gosh.
And then Eric
Oh my
says,
gosh.
"Love you, I love Ali."
Oh my gosh, these are my people.
So much love. So much love.
Oh my God, thank you, Joe. You know, I look, you know, I want to keep in touch with everyone, you know, like,
Absolutely.
and how we can kind of, you know, because it's kind of interesting because at this time, I think it's giving me self-reflective because, you know, I want to do everything for everyone. And my mom's like, it's, you know, I can't really, this is the time that I have to accept that I just, you know, like the serenity prayer, you accept the things you cannot change. I mean, you know, we need to accept the things we cannot change. I mean, we can live in a world of fear, but, you know, I refuse to live in a world of fear because, you know what, I mean, living with a disability all those years was the fear I was living in the wilderness. I mean, and I mean, I think all of us are so fortunate to be, you know, to have our life and to live in this world and just to have food on our table and, you know, family and friends and, you know, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you.
With that said, thank you
Yeah.
again, Austin.
Well, I'm glad I'm done. Thank you so much. No, don't worry. I'm glad that everyone's like, oh my God, I don't know. I was like, whoa, you guys are getting anxious. I'm like, I don't know. Tell me when. I'm like, hold on. I'm like, this Jolie. I'm like, Jolie, what are you doing, bro? Joe, I need the link.
I know.
I'm like,
so
I'm on the
sorry.
comment. I'm like, I need the link.
I
Yeah.
saw your
I'm
email.
like,
Urgent link.
I know my friends like my auntie Margie. I don't know. And then my different. Then the other person texting me. I'm like, I don't know. I said, but I get because I do this stuff and I'm anxious. I just be texting. Okay, thank you everybody. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Austin.
We could do a 101 sometime. You know.
Let's
I mean,
definitely
obviously
do.
these people
Let's
would not have
definitely
been
do
able to
101.
come in person, but they're from Nevada, New York, LA, all these people. Thank you so much.
Let's definitely. Hey, let's hold a virtual summit one of these days. Let's get together.
Oh
Austin,
yeah, virtual summit. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Stay healthy, stay well, and take care.
Wow.